And welcome back to my channel. It's Johnny Reads here. Thank you so much for coming back, and those who are new, welcome. I'm excited to have you. So in today's video, I'm going to do a bookbang, and that's where we're going to share a meal together and do a book review. But before we get into that, I did want to talk to you about a few things. So I've created some bookish socials on Instagram and Twitter. I've put the links down in the description if you want to go and follow me for daily updates or uploads. Another thing I wanted to talk to you about is the comments. So a lot of you left comments, and I really appreciate the encouragement. All of them were positive, so thank you so much. For some reason, while I'm in my channel, I can't look or respond to the comments, not just on my video, but on every video for some reason. I'm wondering if it's like a new creator thing. However, just so you know, for everyone who left a positive comment, thumbs up. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Hopefully in this next video, I'll be able to like and reply to your comments. Just want to let you know, that's why I wasn't interacting with you guys in the last video. Hopefully I'll be able to this time. If I'm not, just know that it's because YouTube isn't letting me at this time. What I thought I could do though, is on Twitter, I could take a screenshot of a comment that I thought is positive. All you have to do in order to consent to that is put a little plus sign at the end of your comment, and then I can screenshot and reply to you on Twitter if you want to follow me there, and we can have some interactions on Twitter. I did want to let you know, so my schedule for the videos as of right now is to post every Sunday. It might change in the future depending on my work schedule and just life in general. Yeah, just note that my schedule might change in the future based on things I'm doing in life, but I'll make sure to post at least once a week. So if it's not on Sunday, it'll be before. So that way at least you get something during that week. The book that we're going to be doing a bookbang on is Hyperion. It was one of my favorite books of the year. I gave it 5 stars. If you've read it, great. I'm going to do a spoiler-free and then a spoiler review because I really want to get into the meat of this book. I have a lot to say about it. I'll put title cards in the video to let you know, hey, this is when the spoiler is coming up. That way you guys can exit if you don't want the book to be spoiled. I definitely recommend reading it. It's a great read. Like I said, I gave it 5 stars. So what I want you to do now, because I want you to join me, I'm going to be eating breakfast because it's morning here where I'm at. So I'm going to go make myself breakfast, and I'm going to come back and share my meal with you guys. You guys pause the video, go grab something to eat, whether it's breakfast, lunch, dinner, or a snack, maybe some popcorn, and eat with me, and we'll be back. Well, that was a little bit of a long time for me, but only a few seconds for you guys. All right, so I made a breakfast bowl. So scrambled eggs, bacon, cheese, and grits. So that's what I'm going to be eating with you guys today, and going over Hyperion. All right, let's get into it. So for those who haven't read the book, I'm going to read the summary off the back, and then we'll go into the themes of the book, or the themes that I interpreted it. Here it goes. On the world called Hyperion, beyond the law of the hegemony of man, there waits the creature called the Shrike. There are those who worship it, those who fear it, and there are those who have vowed to destroy it. In the Valley of the Time Tombs, where huge brooding structures move backward through time, the Shrike waits for them all. On the eve of Armageddon, with the entire galaxy at war, 7 pilgrims set forth on a final voyage to Hyperion, seeking the answers to the unsolved riddles of their lives. Each carries a desperate hope and a terrible secret, and one may hold the fate of humanity in his hands. Wow, just in like a paragraph that was impactful. Made me want to read it, and I did. So now we'll be getting on to the themes of the book. So there are several deep themes in this book. There's a lot of commentary on religion, and mostly the Abrahamic religions. You have several chapters that go over the 3 major ones: Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. And they have characters that significantly represent these religions. In the commentary, Dan Simmons was not fond of these religions. I'll say that, because he doesn't write them in a positive light. So if you are someone who is convicted, if you're religious and you're convicted not to read something like that, this book might not be for you. However, I thought it was interesting to see someone else's point of view on religion, and being a Christian, I feel a sympathy and an empathy for Dan and these characters, because there are things that I feel like are misinterpreted. But I won't go too deep into that right now. So there's a huge commentary on religion, the corruption of it, and the fact that, like, in this book, none of the things that God has promised in these religions has happened. One, Earth no longer exists, and they're living on other planets. But it also Dan puts a lot of personal, I feel like, experiences with religion in here. Besides religion, there's also a theme of government corruption. It's really hard to speak about the government corruption and greed without giving spoilers. So I'm going to try and do my best. Basically, the hegemony of man is trying to expand, trying to find new planets, new resources for its ever-growing population. And they want to go and colonize these planets, whether they're inhabited with indigenous people or not, and take their resources or abuse the alliances. And you see that in a couple of the chapters where the hegemony is making a false alliance to eventually be able to take over fully with these planets. Because we do have a few planets that have civilization on it. We have some that are, I would say, tribal. And then there are some planets that have no life, but maybe animal life on it. So no intelligent life on these planets, but they are inhabitable. So that's kind of where the corruption and greed come from with the government, because it's taking resources away from people without caring about the consequences and the harm that they inflict on others. Governments are supposed to protect the people that live under their rule and make sure that no harm is coming to them. And they're also supposed to make peaceful alliances and not cause harm to another government's or organization's people. A government is supposed to serve the people, and I think that's Dan's view. And another theme that I think Dan talks on is our dependence on technology. So you have the Technocorp, which is an AI. The AI wanted to leave. They became independent, self-aware. They became independent and self-aware and decided that they wanted to govern themselves, live in the core, and they also make kind of cyborg type beings as well to interact with humans. And the reason why they still interact with humans is because the hegemony of man completely depended on technology. And I think that Dan was kind of foreseeing how technology was going even in the 80s, and our dependence being glued to a television screen for entertainment. I mean, and it comes true. We're dependent on technology. A lot of us are. Do you ever feel anxious when you don't have your phone on you? Do you think that you could spend a day without your phone? Or even a tablet or a television? Is that something that you think that you can do? I think it scares a lot of people. That's kind of the commentary that Dan is talking about here with the Technocore. He's talking about how dangerous and depending on technology can be. I don't think we've progressed that far, but I think it just talks about the dependence on technology and how it can be harmful, and how when we're not relying on the things that the land gives us or our own abilities of doing things, and we take the easy way with technology, trying to say that we're building things more efficient, there ends up being a negative consequence to it. So what I think Dan is saying when it comes to technological progress, we end up forming a dependence on it. We stop utilizing the skills that we had and start depending on technology to do it for us. I mean, there's a machine where you literally pop in the ingredients and it makes a meal for you. I don't know about you, but there's always something when I finish cooking and the meal is good, some sense of accomplishment. I think we're I mean, yes, you're making things more efficient, saving time, but is that the worth losing the experience of having accomplishment, knowing that you made something great? I don't know. But I think that's kind of what he's getting at. That when we use technology to replace these skills that we have, these skills that we're meant to be doing, like what does that say about our humanity? Do we lose it? Do we lose what it is to be human, to get in the dirt? I mean, yes, tools are great and tools help a lot, especially when you're trying to produce so much for so many. But I think that we start losing ourselves when we start depending on something else to do things for us. I mean, let me know what you think in the comments. I mean, I could be completely wrong. That's just how I interpreted that. So the next thing I wanted to talk to you about is the similarities between Hyperion and the Canterbury Tales. So the Canterbury Tales is basically a series of 48 stories, poems, I guess you could say, that are about pilgrims. Each one is a different pilgrim. They're not pilgriming together. Well, some of them are. Some of them are pilgriming together. Some of them are not, but they're all headed to one place. They're going on a pilgrimage. And when I read Canterbury Tales, I don't think there was a framework. So that's one thing that is different about this, is that there is a framework story. All the characters of the stories that you're reading are interacting with one another in the framework at the beginning and end of the chapters. So because of its structure and because of its main storyline, there is a similarity to Canterbury Tales that a lot of people talk about, which I can see. However, when I was reading this, there were themes of corruption and sin, and also, like, you know, our humanity losing our humanity to our desires, I guess, or losing ourselves to our desires. And so at first I kind of, because it's called, the series, it's a 4-book series. This series is called the Hyperion Cantos. Dante's Inferno of the Divine Comedy is written in cantos. I thought that when I was first reading this, that there were a lot of similarities to Dante's Inferno, and that this was Dan Simmons' version of the Divine Comedy. It's his Divine Comedy that he is writing, because a lot of these characters represent or come into contact with someone who represents a 7 deadly sin. However, Dante's Inferno is not about the 7 deadly sins. It's about the 9 circles of hell, which some of the sins of the 9 circles of hell are the 7 deadly sins. And there are a lot of the stories, each kind of have a dedicated sin that it's talking about. And when I go into the spoiler review, I'll talk about that more. But it's just really interesting to also see that similarity. The Dante's Inferno is about a singular guy walking with, I think, an angel or a spirit or a version of God through hell. And he's going closely towards the center of hell, where Satan is, and he's facing several different demons and sins. Like each level, like hell, I guess, is like this level thing. It's like a kind of an upside down pyramid. And so you have limbo, and then you have a sin for each other circle until you get to the center of it. And so to me, it's kind of like the Shrike, who is this mystical, dangerous creature who is tempting every single one of these people into doing terrible things, or is doing terrible things to them. It's kind of like the devil. And because each backstory that we're listening to represents a specific sin of the 7 deadly sins, I thought that there were similarities, maybe even some things that were drawn from Dante's Inferno. I felt like Dan Simmons got inspired by Dante's Inferno and it helped write Hyperion. Now, I have not read the other 3 books, so if this was supposed to be his version of the Divine Comedy, I can't confirm. One, no one can really confirm that because it's not really said, but I haven't read the other books as well. So I don't know how the other books would relate to the other stories. I think Purgatory and Heaven are the other 2 books in the Divine Comedy. Maybe I'm getting it completely wrong. Who knows? I mean, I need to read the other books in order to really come to that conclusion. But I mean, tell me your thoughts. If you've read this book, like, do you see where I'm coming from? And if you watch the spoiler-filled review that's about to come, like, let me know if after I explain it through detail that you can see, okay, I get where he's coming from now. But I could be completely wrong in this thought and seeing similarities to Hyperion and Dante's Inferno. So that is going to conclude our spoiler-filled review. So you have a lot of themes and commentary in this book that make it really deep in just 430 pages. That's very impressive to be able to write a piece of literature like that, to talk about so many different things and to write it really well, really in depth, make these characters people that you care about or really, really dislike. The ending is probably my favorite thing about this book. And I'm not going to tell you in this part of the review. You're going to have to watch the spoiler review, which is about to come up. If you are someone who likes deep themes, who likes books that are inspired from previous literature, from historical literature, I think that's just so impressive to be able to write something like this inspired me. So I'm going to write this other epic tale in the same way that this guy did it, but it's my own story. So I think that can be really impressive. Like I said in the last book, I really like stories like that. The Dark Tower and the Priory of the Orange Tree are all based off of classic and historical literature. That's it for my spoiler-free review, and we're now going to go into the spoiler review. Oh, hey, you're still around. Cool. Now that those who don't want spoils are gone, let's talk about the meat of this book. Let's get into the characters and the plot of this book in a deep dive. So we have a prologue, and we meet the consul in the prologue, which is a character, and his backstory is told at the end. He's on a ship, and he's been invited to this pilgrimage. Some goes. So the next thing we see at the beginning of chapter 1 is him waking up from cryogenic sleep. By the way, tell me if you're still eating. I am. I'm eating slow today. Sorry. It's hard to eat and talk at the same time. Also, I just don't know how it is with like eating on camera. So yeah. Anyways. So let's talk about chapter 1. In chapter 1, the consul, he is on a ship that is described to be like a giant tree. So our consul, when he gets to this large boardroom, meeting room, maybe it's the bridge of the ship, he meets the other 6 pilgrims. You have a professor, a priest, a soldier, a private investigator, a poet. Then you have, I think, the captain of the ship, and then, of course, a government diplomat. So we start off with the backstory of the priest. The backstory isn't actually about the priest. It's about a friend of the priest, Father Dure. I think that's how you pronounce it. So Father Dure is exiling himself to Hyperion, which no one really thinks is a good idea. But he wants to go and meet these indigenous people. He's just wanting them to become Catholic in a sense and follow the order. The trek is very dangerous. He's the only one who survives because this indigenous people, the Bakura, live very isolated. They live on top of a cliffside, but surrounding them are these trees that are kind of like one of those like Tesla coil things, you know, so there's electricity that goes back and forth, but it only happens at specific times, kind of like a storm. And if you get trapped in there, you're not going to live. So he finally gets to the Bakura. They don't kill him because he is wearing a crucifix. These people, the Bakura, also worship what's called the cruciform. So the priest starts getting really confused because of the fact that they don't believe in Christ, but they worship a cruciform. And so because he's not Bakura and he's an outsider, he does not get to go to their special ceremony that they go to every day. And he's intrigued. What is going on here? There's also a few weird incidences where, like, someone dies. They then take the body and take it down the cliff into this sanctuary that they have. And the next day he's walking around. He's like, what is going on here? He goes down, he sneaks down while the Bakura are off doing their jobs and sees that there is a crucifix or cruciform cross in this sanctuary. And it is beautiful because of the sunrise and sunset. But the cruciform is like also a parasite in a sense. So something happens to Father Dure and he gets placed on this table and the shrike is there. He somehow appears. And when he wakes up, there is this bone, there's this cross bone-like structure on his chest. It's a scarred over, but it's hard. This is how the Bakura, one, have been living so long, because the Bakura don't have children. They only have a kid when one of them has true death, because they believe that there can only be a certain amount of them, basically. So, and this is how they're living. So this parasite basically contains their DNA. If they should die, they take the cruciform off and then it rebuilds their body. So they live forever, basically. Father Dure panics because he's like, oh, this is miserable. This is not what I want. I don't want to be here anymore. And he doesn't want to live forever. So he ends up making a decision to try and experience true death. Doesn't work. So he goes to the Tesla trees around. He hangs himself up there, like in a cross formation, and just repeatedly gets electrocuted over and over again. He gets electrocuted and dies. And then the cruciform brings him back to life. And then he dies. And the cruciform brings him back to life. And then he dies. That's kind of what happens in the first story. And Father Hoyt, who is the priest that is on the ship with everybody else, he is the friend of Dr. Dure, and he's the one that found him. After that, we discovered that Father Hoyt then took the cruciform and put it on him in the hopes of bringing back Father Dure, right? And apparently there's a terrible cost to it. So I really thought that was neat. So I really thought that this story from a Seven Deadly Sin was greed or self-desire, or self-glorification. Father Dure only cared about himself and only cared about making a name for himself, to put himself above others. So that's kind of where I got that Seven Deadly Sin. The second chapter is about the soldier. His name is Kassad. This is actually his story. This isn't about someone else that interacted with him. This is about Kassad. Kassad is a soldier who is with a battalion that is fighting the ousters repeatedly. But we first start off in a simulation room where he has intimate relations with a figure, which is not for me. I don't really care for it. But the story basically is that there is a female named Manat, which we don't know until like the end of the chapter, and she keeps appearing to Kasad. They then have a battle above the planet Hyperion. And the only way that they have this fight, this battle, or that Kasad is even in this battle, is that he is injured in the hospital and he's the only one that survives the ship blowing up. And the way that he survives is that an ouster came in and then he stole their spacesuit. He survives basically just floating in space, fighting these ousters. He ends up killing them, stealing one of their ships, which is described to look like a squid. And then he goes and crashes on the planet, where he then wakes up to Manat. A few days later, or a few hours later, I'm not really sure on the timeline, the ousters are there. Manat then gives Kasad the power to freeze time. So it's a Kasad against hundreds or thousands of ousters. And he kills them all because they're all frozen. And then he goes into an intimate scene with Manat. And then Manat turns into the Shrike. And that was probably the most disturbing thing I had ever read. That freaked me out. Yeah, so Manat turned into the Shrike. So Kasad was really having relations with the Shrike. And the Shrike was luring him there so that he could kill the ousters. So it also shows you like a manipulative side of the Shrike. That I did not care for the second chapter. I didn't care for the second story. I mean, definitely the part where he's in space fighting the ousters was really cool, but that chapter was not for me. The third chapter is about my least favorite. He is the most arrogant and obnoxious character. So he actually grew up on Earth. He is old. He's centuries old. The way he's centuries old is because, one, of time dilation from traveling from the dead Earth to where the hegemony is now centrally located. So there's that. And then also, it's in the future, they have a lot of technology that can reverse aging. And he has used his money to do that. He grew up rich, okay? And he grew up with a great education. And that's how he's obnoxious. Because his family was so rich, they got to stay on Earth and use the last of the resources. And they sent him out when the actual Earth was going to die. And everybody else stayed. I think he was the only one that left the planet and everyone else stayed. So anyways, in the time, somehow he loses all of his money, becomes poor, and then starts to work his way up, starts to do construction jobs, actually putting work into life. So there's that. He's starting to experience what it's like to have to do a job. So as he's doing this, he's writing, and he's writing a cantos, a poem, a book of poems, of literature. He gets it published. It does not do well. People in this day and age don't like poems. They don't like poetry. They don't like any form of stylized classical literature. They want stories to get them to escape from their lives. So, in order to actually earn some money from his books, the agency or the publishing company is still working with him. He still has his agent and editor. And so he actually creates this, like, I would say like a Alex Cross type character book. So there's several of them, and he writes a lot of them. And he becomes a billionaire. Thinks he's living an extravagant lifestyle again, but he, instead of just being content with what he's doing, he's like, I want to publish my poetry. And the publishing company's like, I don't want to spend the money on it because it's not going to make money. There's not going to be an investment, a return on it. And Martin, who is the character's name, does not care. He's like, publish my poetry. Publish my poetry. I want my poetry published. I want my poetry book published. And basically at some point he walks away. He loses the publishing contract. And they actually own the rights to his like mystery thriller series. And they hire another author to write it. He doesn't lose any of his money, but he loses his ability to publish new books. And then he goes and partners with the Sad King or partners, I don't know. He goes and joins the court of the Sad King. And the poet is using the Shrike as inspiration. That is his muse. And so he starts writing more poetry, and he's calling it Hyperion Cantos. That is the book that he's writing. And the king thinks that because he's writing this, that the Shrike is tormenting them. So the king then starts to destroy the manuscript of the poetry. And then the Shrike comes and attacks and kills the king. And the way he kills the king is he literally just envelops and hugs him. And because like these things are like as sharp as knives, he literally hugs him and pushes himself into him and kills him. As the king is dying, he's trying to tell the poet to end it. The poet is not going to do that. The Shrike is his muse. But the poet leaves and tries to look for a reason to come back. And there's centuries pass between that and the pilgrimage. The fourth chapter is about the professor. The professor is a Jewish character. Yeah, he uses the scripture from Genesis that talks about the sacrifice of Isaac. Because the Shrike is sending visions across space into Saul's mind and is telling him to go and bring his daughter to sacrifice for him. His daughter grows up and becomes an archaeologist. She goes into the time tombs. The time tombs activate and erupt while she's there. They don't get destroyed. They just kind of like, they activate, I guess you can say. And as they activate it, they envelops her, and then she starts to de-age and reverse in time. So this is how we know that the time tombs do this. Saul ends up rebelling against his faith that he was born into and ends up making the decision to go and kill the Shrike because the Shrike is related to the time tombs, has been telling him to come and kill his daughter. So because the Shrike is the one who harmed Rachel, is the reason why she's got this uncurable, age-reversing Benjamin Button disease, he makes the decision to go and kill the Shrike. That's why he's on the pilgrimage. And so I think that he represents wrath. And I don't think I said this. So chapter 2 represents lust. And I think that chapter 3 represents two things, gluttony and pride. All right, then we go on into the 5th chapter, which is about the private detective. She encounters this humanoid, basically is a product of the core. And this is where we find out that the core is basically going Terminator on the hegemony of man and is using the ousters to help them. They've also created this godlike AI to create new life because the AI has started building humanoid type bodies and implanting themselves into it. So, however, most of the AIs live in the core, which is like a web. Or they live in the web. No, they live in the core. So, anyways, their plan is to destroy humanity and destroy the hegemony. The PI is solving a murder investigation of this humanoid, and the humanoid like can go into other bodies. Basically, he has a line of bodies. So when one gets killed, he can go into another. But when he was killed, a chunk of his memory was taken. Anyways, they go on a mission to find out who killed him, knowing that it was, and then they find out that it was an assassination from the Technocore. They go into the Technocore virtually and try to destroy it. So 3 of them went in there. There's another, like her brother, I think. And her brother dies, and then her and the android dies there too, saving her so that she can get out. Anyway, so she escapes. She's covered in blood. Police start to come after her, but she finally gets to this sanctuary, this temple of one of the, which is like the religion of the Shrike, and she's asked for protection. And the priests say, or ardents, I don't know what they're called. I think they're priests. Say that the only way that she can come in is if she goes on this mission with the Shrike. And that's the story of 5. So, chapter 6 is the console. So, the background story for the console doesn't really involve him. It involves Marin Aspic and a girl named Siri. Marin is part of a is part of the hegemony who have come to this inhabited planet and its islands, basically. The planet is water with islands on it. Siri is, I think, a government figure, or the daughter of a government figure. They meet as teenagers. Marin, as he's kind of working up, he is working on building the Farcaster, which is going to take decades to build. The Farcaster, like I said, are the portals that the hegemony used to go back. It's basically, that's what they call the web. So it basically is just another portal for them to go into so that they can get to this planet. Marin and Siri develop a relationship, an intimate one. And Marin has to continuously go back to ship and travel away. But he experiences time dilation. So while it's only been a few days or a few weeks or even maybe a few months for him at some points, he comes back and it has been years and decades. Every time he comes back, he's found that she's had a child and it is his. They're his children. So he comes back one day and finds that Siri is dead. He also has discovered that the hegemony is trying to actually take over this island instead of this island being allied and acting independently to govern itself. The hegemony is trying to take over, not necessarily violently, but in a, I would say, in a coup. So he finds this out. And to act revenge, he sets bombs off in the Farcaster so that it is destroyed and becomes an enemy of the hegemony. He does that as a act of, he's avenging Siri because it's just, this agreement was not something that they wanted. Turns out later that we learn that the consul is the grandson of Marin. And the relationship to the Shrike Okay, so the consul doesn't really have an interaction with the Shrike before here. However, he wants to further act revenge for Siri and Marin. And so, because of the fact this pilgrimage is about requesting something from the Shrike, he's going to meet the Shrike so that he can exact proper revenge on the hegemony who betrayed his family. So that kind of is what the last chapter about. What happens in the overarching story, I mean, it is literally just the pilgrimage. They go from the ship down to the main city. They get on a boat that sails on a grass ocean. They're going on like this sky tram, and then once they get off the sky tram and the consul tells his story, they decide to walk the rest of the way. And the reason why I love the ending of this book, because they don't get to the time tombs at the end of this book. It ends kind of in the middle of their journey. So as they leave, part of one of the characters grew up watching The Wizard of Oz. And a few others know the song, but a few others don't. So they go together, arm in arm, walking down the path, singing a song from The Wizard of Oz. I just thought it was beautiful. And the reason why I like that, especially at the time, is because I'm reading the Dark Tower series, and the Wizard of Oz is used in the Dark Tower. There are a few things that resemble the Wizard of Oz, that resemble the Emerald City. And also another thing for these characters is that they see the time tombs, and the time tombs are glowing green in the sunset. So it looks like they're approaching the Emerald City, and I love that. And that's where the book ends, and it continues. However, I do want to state that this is the only book in the series that's written like this. The rest are told in a narrative format instead of in short stories. That's kind of what happens in the first book. That's kind of my spoiled-filled review. I know this was long. I hope you guys had a good time watching with me. and eating with me. But anyways, this is the end of the video. Like and subscribe. Also go to my socials and follow me on there for extra bookish content. Hit the like button on this video and subscribe to my channel. I'm going to be here every Sunday, so I hope to see you guys next week. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. This is Johnny Reads, over and out.